I know I have an NDA about this, but I don't even care anymore. I need to tell somebody this story, and it's not like anyone's going to believe me anyway. They'd just call me crazy. I'm not. I was a copier technician. You wouldn't think that a technician would need to sign a non-disclosure agreement, but I had one because I often serviced the machines on military bases. That's not the crazy part. This is. A long time ago, I was making a regular service call for 3 Canon machines. I'm not going to say exactly where I had to go, but it was somewhere in Colorado, outside of Denver. I was working on the machines in an unrestricted area when a secretary came in panicking because the main copier had just broken down as they were running a major job. Some high-ranking officer had a report due in the next hour, and the copier had jammed. Could I please kindly save the day? I could work miracles, and on this one, I needed to. What had happened was not a normal paper jam. I practically had to take the whole thing apart to find out that a shred of paper was tripping a sensor and causing it to report the jam as unresolved. Oh, and the secretary accidentally snapped a part when she was pulling papers out. It was a ridiculously small, very delicate part, and without it, the whole machine was just one big dead weight. Now, the good news was I had the part and the kit in my car. The bad news was I had the part in my car. That meant I would need to be escorted out of the building by security, go to my car, and be escorted back in. The MP that escorted me out was a nice kid. He seemed young, but he also seemed like he had been through some stuff. I figured he was finishing out his time here after coming back from some overseas tour that still haunted him. There was just something about his eyes that got to me. Honestly, I felt bad for him, being so young and having to see things that made him look so haunted. But he was nice enough, in a professional soldier way, as he escorted me out to my work truck and watched me rummage around for my kit and the part I needed. When I straightened up, I happened to look out over the base in the direction of the mountains, and that's when I saw something odd. I was used to seeing uniformed military on the base, but this time I swore I saw a group of men in pale suits. Weird. I found what I needed, grabbed the box, and decided to concentrate on my job and not on what I thought I'd seen. I was on a military base, and I'd signed an NDA for a reason. But just then, a siren started going off. It started low, and then it ramped up until the sound was this long, loud wail. Now, I was no stranger to this base, but I'd never heard that siren before, and I was a little startled. I looked at my guard. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. I could hear his radio crackle. I couldn't make out what was being said, probably because it sounded like a code. I sure couldn't think of another reason for someone to be rattling off a string of numbers. "I need you to come with me, now." That was when I noticed that the MP had freed his sidearm. I went without another word. He got me into the office building where the secretarial pool was visibly nervous. They were all filing into an interior conference room. I got politely urged to join them, and then the door was locked. That's when I noticed that the door was locked from the inside. Weird. At this point, I not only had no idea what was going on, I was getting more and more curious as to what was causing all the trouble. Alarms going off, soldiers coming out of nowhere, the MP freaking out, shelter in place. What was going on? Colorado isn't a stranger to tornadoes, and though it wasn't really the season for them, that didn't mean that one hadn't decided to make an appearance. I figured that was the most reasonable answer, until I heard the screaming start. I say screaming, but it didn't sound like any kind of human scream. It sounded, to this day I'm not sure, part roar, part steam whistle, part shriek. It was the freakiest thing I've ever heard. The lights flickered, and the secretaries huddled around me flinched. Somebody bit off a scream. I looked around, and the weirdest thing was that I saw lots of scared expressions, but not one of those women looked surprised. I don't know how long we sheltered in place, but I do remember hearing shouting outside and a lot of heavy truck sounds. Screeching brakes, the works. Whatever was going on, a lot of manpower was being mobilized to deal with it. No way this was because of a tornado. The howl happened again, then it cut off just like that. Like someone had yanked the power cord out of a speaker. It just stopped. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what I should think. But I looked at the faces of the people in that locked conference room with me, and I knew I shouldn't ask. Eventually, someone knocked on the door. The lead secretary stepped up to the door and asked for a passcode before she unlocked the thing. That's how serious whatever had happened was. An officer came into the room and told me to come with him. He debriefed me for an hour before he let me go with a stern warning about prosecution if I didn't abide by the terms of my non-disclosure agreement. At that point, I didn't even care about that. How could I disclose anything that had just happened? I didn't understand any of it. That same MP from before walked me back to my work truck. I didn't even bother to ask if I should fix that copier. Not very professional, but I figured if they didn't ask me to do it, I wouldn't bring it up. Not after all that. The ground was all churned up by my truck. Tire tracks had dug deep into the dirt, and I could still smell the exhaust from the heavy vehicles. The weird thing was that I didn't just smell diesel fumes. There was this heavy smell, like someone had ticked off a couple of skunks and a dog had peed somewhere nearby. It was bad enough that I asked the MP if the site had a skunk problem. He just gave me a blank look and a wave to move along. So I did. It's been years, but I still have questions about what happened that day. What was that scream? Why didn't those secretaries look surprised? What was really going on out there on that base? Maybe I shouldn't care. After all, it was years ago. But there's still some part of me that wants answers. Not that I'll ever get them. I had always dreamed of walking the Appalachian Trail. I wasn't sure if I could do the entire trail, so I began to travel smaller trails across the Appalachians, training myself to tackle the big ones someday. The full trail takes you through something like 14 states, from Georgia to Maine. That's not something you can just hike on a weekend and then be back home after a couple of days. It takes months to travel, and takes time to plan and prepare for. I've always loved being outdoors, and I had traveled a bunch. I was certain with training I could do the whole trail one day. I had started training with my friend Dennis. We'd travel around hiking different trails, sleeping in tents out in the woods, then travel some more. We'd been doing this on and off for months, and it seemed to me that we were making great progress. We decided to take a trip to the Great Smoky Mountains and stay there and train for a few weeks. It's a beautiful area. The mountains are really a fantastic sight. The amount of unspoiled nature is just amazing. We decided to find some of the longest trails and hike as many as well we could while we were down there. It was on our third day down there. We had already traveled a few trails. We were camping out in tents at various campgrounds. We were heading up through one of the long ones, really going uphill. It was rough, but it was great for training. We stopped to rest and drink some water before we continued on the trail. That's when we heard a strange call. It was low, kind of like a grumbling, but it was loud enough it seemed to carry for a long ways. I asked Dennis if it was a stag's call or a moose or something. He was pretty sure moose didn't travel so far south, but he wasn't positive. We were more worried about a black bear than anything else. It called 3 times, then stopped. We decided it would be best if we kept going up the trail. We were climbing up through the trees and bush when we heard some limbs snapping behind us. We stopped to take a look to see if it was other hikers or if it was an animal in nature. Something was moving through the brush, but we couldn't really see anything. We kept going up and around a rock base, through trees and brush, then wrapped around heading downhill. As we were traveling downhill, we heard something moving above us. Something spooked a bunch of birds. They took to the air, squealing and squawking. I'd never seen anything like it before. That's when the stones came. From somewhere above us, something was throwing stones at us. I couldn't tell if it was just trying to frighten us away or if it had really bad aim. They weren't really big stones, maybe golf ball sized and smaller. We traveled back up the hill to see who was throwing them, and that's when they stopped. Something moved to our left, and that's when we saw it. It was just a dark shape moving through the trees and brush. But as it moved downhill, then we got a good look at it. It was gray-furred, going from dark gray to light, almost white at the tips. We knew it wasn't a bear. There were no bears with fur like that. It seemed to travel on 2 legs, then 4. I swear it had horns like a goat. I looked at Dennis and he looked at me, and we decided to move closer towards it. Not our best idea ever, but we needed to see what the hell it was up a little closer. It kept moving through, gaining speed, so we decided to run down as close as we could to it. We were maybe 30 or 40 feet away. It turned its head, and we got a better look. It bellowed at us, that same low grumbling sound we had heard back on the trail. Its face was goat-like with horns and everything. Its eyes had the weird rectangle pupils that goats have, but its teeth seemed more human than goat. It stood on its hind legs with a log in hand and beat the tree next to it. Me and Dennis started to back up, going back up the hill backwards, really slowly. It bellowed again, then threw the log towards us. It smashed against a rock maybe 5 feet away from me. That's when Dennis began to run, and I decided to follow him. We ran up and through the trees and brush, over stone and dirt, pushing branches out of our way. Still, some of them cut our faces as we ran past. I didn't know if the thing was chasing us or not, but I wasn't going to stop and find out either. At some point, we stopped near the end of the trail. We noticed that there were 2 park ranger trucks parked there. We ran up to the trucks and told the rangers there was something on the trail. At first, they thought we were talking about bears, but then we slowed down and told them what we saw. They came with us, back to the spot where we had seen the thing. We showed them where the thing had thrown the log and how it was smashed against some rocks. We walked down to where it was moving through the trees and brush, and that's where we found weird tracks. Its tracks. They took pictures of the tracks and wrote down what we told them. I don't know if they really believed us, though. They may have thought we were putting them on. I don't know. I'll never forget what we saw, though. I've decided against traveling the Appalachian Trail now. Dennis has come to the same conclusion. I think there's some kind of entity haunting my house. I got a divorce a few months ago, and I've been back living with my mom since the split. I wanted to be independent and move out as soon as I could, so I jumped at the opportunity to buy my house. I was surprised to see the price was so low, but it had been on the market for a while, and it's not exactly in a booming area. It was perfect for me, though. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, with a finished basement and an attic with this beautiful circular window that I thought would be an amazing office space. I moved in and started setting it up to my taste, excited to not to have to cater to anyone else's design ideas for once. I decorated my room and the 2 other bedrooms for my kids, who I have joint custody of. It all started with the small things, like keys being misplaced and cabinets being open when I thought I closed them. Now, I have ADHD, so it's easy for me to see these things and think that I left a cabinet door open or put my keys in the freezer. So I really didn't think anything of it at the time. I started feeling like something was in my room with me when I slept. It was a strange sensation, but I could feel eyes on me. Part of me just thought that was nerves from the new house, though. One night I was sleeping, and I woke up suddenly when I heard the TV in the living room turn on. It was loud and playing some action movie with tons of guns and screaming. I got up and slowly walked to the living room and turned it off. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and walked through the house, but I didn't see anything. Honestly, I couldn't explain it, so I ignored it. A few days later, I felt like something grabbed my ankle while I was asleep, but I wasn't sure if maybe it was a dream that had felt super realistic, so I brushed it off. The first time I realized something supernatural was happening was when I was sitting on my couch watching TV, and my basement door opened. It was closed. I know 100% that it was. I have a cat that likes to try and hide down there, so when I use it, I always make sure it's fully closed. I walked to the basement door and pulled the string for the light at the top of the stairs and looked down. I didn't see anything, but I heard a quiet tapping noise. If I had been doing laundry, I'd have thought it was my dryer, but I knew it was empty. I walked down the stairs, pretty anxious about the situation, but when I got down there, I didn't see anything, and the tapping stopped. I walked back to the stairs and got to the top of the stairwell. I saw a figure. I screamed and the door slammed shut. I ran up the steps to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I kept pressing against it, hoping it would open, but it never did. I didn't have my phone with me. I'd left it on the couch when I went to look to begin with. I felt trapped and cornered in my own home. I definitely saw someone or something at the top of the stairs, though I couldn't make out any features. Now they were upstairs doing God only knows what in my house. Every now and then I heard thudding and thumping. I heard glass shatter once. With everything happening, I kind of thought it sounded like a robbery. I didn't know how long I would be trapped down there, but I knew my kids were due to be dropped off in the morning, so at the very least they would see my car in the driveway and go inside. Then I could scream for help. But the door creaked open before morning. I don't know how long I was down there, and I was honestly terrified to leave. But I needed to grab my phone and keys and get out. I snuck upstairs and saw that my kitchen was turned inside out. Food from the fridge was tossed around, glass was broken, cabinets were open, cupboards were emptied. My living room looked ransacked, too. I grabbed my phone and car keys, and thankfully my cat was just waiting by the door. I got in my car, drove a few blocks away, and called the police. They came over shortly after and looked around the house. There was no sign of a break-in, and they genuinely didn't think it looked like anyone else had been in the house. Doors and windows were locked from the inside, and they didn't see other signs of someone else being present. I felt insane. They framed it almost like it was me doing all of this, like it was a desperate plea for attention. But I know what I saw that night. I cleaned everything up and prepared to stay at my mom's house for a few days. I just didn't feel safe there anymore. No one really believed me when I told them what I saw, which is honestly one of the most disheartening feelings I've ever experienced. I did some research online to try and figure out what it could be, and I'm hoping someone will recognize elements of this story and tell me they've gone through something similar, so I can get some answers. I've reached out to the people I bought the house from to see if they've experienced anything like it. I haven't heard anything from them yet, but I'd venture to say it might have been why they were so motivated to sell in the first place.